One of the biggest questions, fears, concerns I get from young adults today, especially millennials and Gen Z, is they're scared, they're concerned that 2008 is going to happen again this year. And I'm going to cover this, and I look back and I go, I know a lot of young adults saw their families, maybe their parents or grandparents, uncles, aunts, lose their homes to short sale or foreclosure from about 2006 through 2010. And it was an incredibly painful time. And you're maybe reliving that and going, oh my gosh, I don't want this to happen to me. Now, I get it. I don't want it to happen to you either. But I'm going to show you three things. We're going to talk about three things why I think this isn't going to happen. First and foremost, mortgages back in the early 2000s were terrible loans. There were a lot of exploding arms. Back then, across the country, 35% of all mortgages were adjustable rate mortgages. We even had mortgages where the interest rate changed every dang month. But most of them were 2 or 3 year arms. They were called subprime arms. And just know this, there were millions of people that got placed into a subprime arm even though they had good credit. Why? The mortgage loan officer made a heck of a lot more money on that subprime arm than they would have on a traditional 30-year fixed. And so you look back and go, a lot of times those subprime arms started out with a rate of 6, 7%. But after 2 or 3 years, typically the rate went up 5 or 6%. And on a $300,000 mortgage, people's mortgage payments were increasing by over $1,000 a month. And they just couldn't afford it anymore. The problem was they weren't alone. Here in Denver, there was tens of thousands of people, homeowners facing this every month. Across the country, there were millions of people who couldn't afford their home, their mortgage payment anymore, and they were forced to sell their home. Today, only 3% of all outstanding mortgages are ARM. 97% of all mortgages are fixed rate loans. So that means they are very, very little risk with those loans because every borrower knows what their payment's going to be long term. So there's very little risk. Plus, underwriting has become, let's just say, a little more difficult than it was back in about 2005 when we had what we call Foggamere loan approvals, meaning if you were still alive, we could get you a loan. Today, it's much more difficult, but it also means there's going to be very few short sales and foreclosures. Number 2 reason why I see this is just the number of homes for sale out there. Because so many people were forced to sell their homes here in Metro Denver, I think there was 3 or 4 summers in a row where we had over 30,000 homes for sale. And then home builders made it even worse. I mean, nationally I've read. The second thing is just realize builders overbuilt. Back, across the country, builders overbuilt by about 2.85 million homes during this time. Here locally, from 2002 to 2005, home builders in Metro Denver built 80,000 new homes. The problem? Fewer than 10,000 net new people moved to Metro Denver in those 4 years. That means home builders should have only built 2,000 or 3,000 new homes for those people moving here. Thus, by 2006, they had 2.5 years of homes for sale. And when you have too much supply of homes for sale, both new and existing, the law of supply and demand tells us prices have to drop. And that's what happened. Prices plummeted overall here in Metro Denver by about 25%, but some neighborhoods saw over a 50% decline. And it was just too much supply of homes for sale. Then you look at today's market, okay? According to the National Association of Home Builders, they believe through 2021 that home builders are behind by at least 2.15 million homes. Okay, here locally in Colorado, I've seen estimates of anywhere from a low of about 30,000 homes that were short to as many as 150,000 homes that were short. And what happens when you don't have enough supply of homes for sale? Well, the law of supply and demand tells you prices are going to rise. And that's what's been happening, especially the last 3 years. Prices rose because supply shrunk and demand soared. And then know this going forward with demand is our country's about to experience the biggest, longest housing boom our country has ever seen. Here's why. I have a chart showing hospital births going back almost 100 years. From 1990 to 2012, you can see that we had roughly, on average, 4 million babies born every year. And thus, those 4 million babies are now growing up. The youngest are now 33 years old, the average age of a first-time home buyer. And thus, we're gonna see potentially 4 million first-time home buyers trying to buy a home for the next 22 years. This is going to be a bigger housing boom, a longer housing boom than what we saw with baby boomers in the 70s and 80s. So what do you think is going to happen when you can combine a limited supply of homes for sale, new and existing, with exploding demand? Home prices are going to rise, and they may soar again as mortgage rates drop because there's just so much demand for housing. And what people often forget is everyone needs a roof over their head. So this is why I don't think 2008 is going to happen again right now. Maybe it will happen in 15, 20 years, but right now, the chances of it happening again, I think, are slim to none. You know, if you disagree, please text me. I want to know. My number is 303-881-6374.